So quality education is seen as a sine qua non or a panacea to national development. But recent results from the West African School Certificate Examination shows abysmal performances in English, math and science, and the uproar and concern have been widespread and broad-based. Today we're going to have a conversation on global education focusing on Ghana and across Africa. Can education save Africa? What are the factors that have led to the very poor performances in English, math and science? And are there other ways or methodologies that we could ascribe to in order to go up on the educational level? Quality education is up for discussion today on World Affairs. So the number to send your questions and comments to is 0500,000 202. 0500,000 202. What were your own experiences studying math, English and science in junior high school and senior high school? Which of them was the big albatross on your neck? And how do you think that has shaped your own experience moving forward? What about the current impasse or the current problems with students of today? Are they just not learning, or is there more that can be done to address this situation? The program starts right now.
An overwhelming 193,882 candidates, amounting to 61.7% of candidates who sat for this year's West Africa Senior School Certificate Examination WASSCE, will have their dreams of entering into university temporarily truncated. This is because they failed to make the minimum mark to pass 2 of the 4 core subjects, English and mathematics. A lot of factors have been attributed to the math failure, including poor quality of teaching and learning, the advent of social media like Facebook and Twitter, use of pidgin English, phobia of some subjects, especially mathematics, and a host of others. Agnes Kujo speaks for the exam body WAEC, and she has been enumerating some of the reasons the chief examiners attributed to the failure.
The chief examiners have expressed concern about the use of pidgin English by some of the students and about their limited stock of vocabulary. And they have recommended that candidates students should read extensively, and that our teachers should give them more exercises in comprehension, in summary, and then they should engage them in spelling drills to improve upon the use of the language. Also, in mathematics, the chief examiners have stated that the students find it difficult translating word problems into mathematical statements before solving them. And they have also stated that with the trigonometry and geometry concepts, the students also find difficult in those areas. They have adduced the following solutions for mathematics: that our teachers should make the study of mathematics more lively and interesting. They should adapt innovative ways to make
this worrying trend raised eyebrows and set tongues wagging as industry players expressed deep concern about the phenomenon, especially on the back of the implementation of the free senior high school policy. Franklin Kujo is president of policy think tank Agyeman Africa, and he says disaster looms for Ghana if this persists.
Remember Ghana experts in an OECD test on maths and science. I think in 2015, Ghana overtook South Africa at the last position. The South Africa, we can understand, because the apartheid government did not allow people to be taught maths and engineering. If a country that claims to be the gateway to West Africa overtakes South Africa at the 76th position, that is where we should have started plotting the plan to overturn the results. But now, the SHS, even before free SHS takes its course, is recording abysmal records. So if you add the plague, which is free SHS, then you have a national disaster waiting. We are not giving education to people. We are actually mass producing It's like a baptism festival we are holding for churchgoers. That's what is happening.
But what are the concerns of the average Ghanaian on what is accounting for the drop in performance in English and math at the senior high school level?
The teachers, what they are doing now, most of the schools, when you go there, they are only teaching the kids how to write exams and pass and go. Instead of teaching the children to understand the meaning of the concept of their core subject that they are learning, or all the subjects, they are not doing that. They say English, the core subject, even the core subject. When are we going? Every the core subject. Where are we going? Something good in somebody, but it's not good in somebody. That is called me. I think the government will see something doing.
Math and English has been an albatross to us in the sense that we've given it too much prominence. This prominence I'm talking about is because there are certain places, there are certain courses that when you fail mathematics you can't do, or when you fail English you can't do. And we have people that they know mathematics very well but they don't know English. And we have people that they know English well but they don't know mathematics.
Evidently, there is a need for government and the entire country as a whole to look at the concerns raised as to why students are constantly failing English and mathematics.
So that was a report put together by Joshua Kojo Mensah and our production team here on the subject of education and failures in some core subjects or so-called core subjects. Welcome back to the program, though. My name is Echi Shikanku. This is World Affairs on Class 91.3 FM, and today I have two wonderful guests in the studio. Dr. Godwin Agboka is coming all the way from Texas in the United States of America, but he's born and bred Ghanaian to every extent of it that you can think about. He is an associate professor in professional and technical communication at the University of Houston, and he's down here in Ghana for some research, but he's written a book on English. He has taught English and communication for quite a while. Great writer, prolific communicator, and an educationalist par excellence. Dr. Godwin Agboka, welcome to World Affairs.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sikanko. I'm glad to be on the program. Yeah.
Pleasure. You know, and Dr. Agboka was actually my JCR president at Sarbah Hall, so it's great to have him back on such a platform. Also on the program is the man from Harvard, Mac Sarbah. He has a very inspiring story from Adidome to Boston. He has gone through a lot of trials and challenges, but his story is not just one of educational success or academic achievement, but also of individual prevalence and a lot of tenacity at his journey, both personally and academically. Mac Sarbah now studies at the very prestigious Harvard University. He's here. He's been doing a whole lot of stuff. We're going to get into that, and hopefully you can learn a thing or two from their experiences as well. You're welcome to the program, Mac.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so what exactly do you study?
Some other graduate school design, doing a master's in design studies. And within that, I'm interested in sort of the role of social entrepreneurship as a conduit to overcoming Africa's social and environmental issues. And so along my career, I've had to visit a lot of countries. I've had projects in India and so many other developing countries. And I've actually seen that, the aid approach, which the West has dealt with Africa in that sense, hasn't worked for us. And I think it's important that we change the narrative. And so within that, I see innovation as being a catalyst. And so it's important for Africans, young Africans, to take the mantle of leadership as reformers, as revolutionaries, and be very alert to stimuli in the environment and be able to find solutions to the prevailing social and environmental issues we have in our countries. And I think that's one of the things that has led me to concentrate on writing extensively on that, and also on climate change and things of this sort.
Well, very interesting. We had one of the contributors to that Vox Pop always saying the core subject, always concentrating on, the academic work that we do in school. But we do know that we live in an age, a global age, where a lot of nations are taking different paths, to development. So we'll be talking about some of these things. So both of you, welcome once again to World Affairs.
Thank you very much.
Right. Later on in the program, we'll be speaking to Professor Naana Jane Opoku Agyeman. Professor Naana Jane Opoku Agyeman, former Minister of Education, but also in her own right, she is a scholar par excellence and an educationist as well, both nationally on the global level, being involved in a lot of teaching, learning and education policy work for Ghana and beyond. So we'll be speaking to Prof to find out really what her experiences were when she was at the ministry and what the way forward is. So welcome once again to World Affairs, everybody, wherever you are listening to this from. Send in your comments and your questions on 0500,020 to be a part of the conversation. We live in politics for a while now, and letting Donald Trump have a break, although it looks like there's quite a bit going on with Donald and the Russians. That's a really, really interesting topic or soap opera that you can talk about all day. But I guess at some point we have to come back and talk about Africa, talk about education, talk about our circumstances, and then we'll continue the global conversations. Send in your comments on 0500,002. 0500,020 to be a part of the conversation, because this program is very participatory in nature and we build knowledge together for the good of our country, Ghana. So get started. Dr. Agboka, I guess I'm going to start with you. Algebra and measurements and geometry and statistics, these are things that we burden with in school. Come to the English language side, which you know more of, subject-verb agreement, the grammar, composition, essays, tenses, and all of that, at the basic junior high, secondary level. How important is all of this in the grand scheme? Because somebody might be sitting back and say, cut the kids some slack. Some of these things are not even important in real life, and I guess that's part of the argument. How important is all of this, to individual and national development?
All right, thank you very much for giving me the platform again. Basically, education is global, right? So I've heard the argument that when we go to school, there are some areas that students should not be interested in.
Okay.
So, for example, someone gets into a computer science program.
Computer science.
And the argument is that, why should I learn English? Why should I learn other areas of the language? Now, you need the English language to express yourself in computer science.
Okay.
And that's how global education is.
Right.
Now, even for the market woman in Makola who goes over there to display her product,
yes,
she needs mathematical concepts to be able to express herself. To know that when she's given 50 Ghana cedis, she has to give a certain change. So that's a global component of education. So all these things actually come together to be able to make the whole of that particular individual.
So the global component, so they needed to participate in the global exchange market.
Exactly, to participate in discourses, whatever discourses that you find yourself. Now, in speaking, one of the things you highlighted was that are all these things necessary? You talked about subject-verb agreement and all those things. Now, for those who are learning languages or some of these concepts, maybe the names of the concept do not matter. They are not important. But for those who are teaching, maybe they have to know what subject-verb agreement is or what those concepts are. What the learners need to know are the benefits of these concepts to their daily discursive practices. That's a crucial component of that. So, yes, you need exactly when you are constructing sentences, when you are doing whatever things you're doing, you need these things, these parts to come together to be able to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So they are really crucial as far as these things are concerned, yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. I guess you've read a bit about this year's performances, so you're familiar with our performance. Is it that bad?
Let me say this. it is a personal tragedy and a collective failure on our part. Now, this is not just
a personal tragedy.
It's a personal tragedy.
The collective failure.
Definitely it is. Now, this is not, it's not as if this is the first time this is happening. I mean, if you look at the OECD report that was released in 2015, for example, out of 76 education systems that were surveyed, a research was done, right? Ghana and South Africa ranked the lowest. This obviously is an issue. Now,
is this generally or just in English and math?
In the core area.
Right? Okay.
So, and that for me is where the tragedy is. Now, if you look at globally, it might not sound so bad, but then if you go to region, that is where you have a problem. There are areas where districts and regions record 0%. And I mean, I know in education terms, what they say is that if students fail to score between aggregate 6 and 30, that's when we look at all those things in all those core subjects. So that is where the tragedy is. And I think that collectively, I typically don't go straight to the government to blame the government when it comes to these issues. I think that it's a holistic issue. The government has a role to play. The private sector has a role to play. Students have a role to play. And teachers, who are also an important stakeholder in all these conversations, also have a role to play. So if you ask me again, it is a tragedy.
A collective failure and a tragedy on our part as a nation. Mark, I'm going to come to you from quite a different perspective, though. I like your story. You went from the doldrums of poverty and obscurity in a village somewhere in the Volta region of Ghana, on the shores of the Keta Sea, where you never, had any glimmer of expectation of you coming to Accra. You went from those circumstances to the University of Ghana, made a mark for yourself academically, and then now you are the pinnacle of educational both achievement and studies, I must say. How did you do that?
To go back to what my colleague here said, I think for me, initially, my parents had been very insistent on me taking education very seriously. I started off in a place called Yeji in the Brongafo region, and I think I was fortunate to have had a solid foundation. And so even though I did go to a secondary school that wasn't particularly glamorous, I had friends who had gone to the Bishop Hermans and the Maulis and the Pressex and all of that. So I think initially I was completely saddened in a complete melancholy. And so upon thorough introspection, I came to the realization that if I worked hard, if I put in as much effort as everyone else, I could particularly do as well as they did. And so that was exactly what I did. Even though we didn't have enough teachers, enough resources, enough books, I was particularly ambitious in the sense that I had created a vision for myself regarding where I wanted to go. And so I didn't allow the circumstances, the difficulties and challenges to get in the way of that. And I think I needed a degree of resilience and unflinching belief in myself. I think that's been very central to my story. Not only that, but also the sheer grace of God. And I've always been an individual that I consider myself slightly iconoclastic in a sense that I don't like to kowtow to a prevailing dogma or a status quo. So I remember when I was at the Dodoma Secondary School, I'd come back on vacations and I'd have friends, parading school jerseys and cloths and things of the sort. And as much as it looked nice, I got to a point where I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, look, Mac, you can do equally as well as these people do. And that was very central to me emerging out of that place to Legon.
Right.
And then from then on to Cambridge, Columbia, and now Harvard. So
it's from Yeji to Adidome to Legon, University of Ghana, Legon, to Columbia, to Cambridge University, and then Harvard University.
Right.
You're a big man.
It's just been by the grace of God, and as much as they sound quite lofty, I think I'd like to maintain that degree of humility. Because that's been very central to my story, to be honest with you.
But of course, definitely in this period of discussions about educational attainment and academic success. I think it's a very inspiring story, both you and Godwin, to come at it from this angle as well. But I'm going to ask you a more substantive question about national development. I guess the reason why there is a lot of uproar about the bad performances is not just for the sake of it, but I guess it is because there is the belief that great or quality education underpins or is extremely critical to how far we move as a nation. I think that is the bottom line argument, and that's why there is a lot of conversation about this. You look at what happens in the classroom, but then if we want to talk about an Africa beyond aid and to kind of move the needle forward in a different way, there's the Rwanda, what they're doing in Rwanda, Botswana, and other things. I guess issues like social entrepreneurship come into the picture. And that is the buzzword now these days, when you go to the global, at a global level. So can you explain to us what really, is all this conversation about social entrepreneurship, innovation, and the Silicon Valley, and all that kind of stuff? What really, can you tell us what really it is, and where it fits in our conversations, both in our academic conversations and in trying to move Ghana beyond aid?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that goes back to my initial comment about, I think our dealings with the West and international organizations like the IMF, the World Bank, United Nations, and the UK have mostly been from the standpoint of aid. And you have scholars like Dambisa Moyo, who wrote a book on debt aid, that was pretty much a counterpunch to the fact that you couldn't necessarily lift Africa from the doldrums of poverty to the pinnacle of development by virtue of aid. And when you look at the models that are used by the IMF, the World Bank, and all of these international organizations, they've been from the standpoint of conditionality. There are strings that are attached to them. More recently, you have China, which pretty much came into the picture. But on the other hand, you're having Chinese, even though to some extent they're bringing development and things of the sort, but they're bringing labor from their part of the world. And so, as someone who's had a very long journey within that space and paid a lot of visits to countries beyond the confines of Ghana, I've seen that innovation is pretty much one of the very, very best ways to approach solving Africa's issues, in a sense that co-creation, which is a conversation we do have in design schools, is that you need to use the stakeholders. You need to look at the stimuli in the environment. You need to be able to sort of encourage young people to look at problems within the environment and create solutions to them. And that's where social entrepreneurship comes in. So basically, a social mission is very central to it. Making profit is more the means to an end, not the end in and of itself. So within the broader scope of development, I think it's important that we instigate and create ecosystems and avenues that enable young people with ideas to be able to go to market and create solutions to problems we have, be that in education, healthcare, the environment, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so say that again. Social entrepreneurship is what?
So social entrepreneurship is basically entrepreneurship with a social mission, in the sense that young people that are very, very dissatisfied with the status quo are becoming revolutionaries, reformers, people that are challenging and finding ways that they could solve problems within the environment without resorting to the use of the government. Or even if they do, those are more enablers in order to help achieve these goals.
Okay. And are we doing that in our schools?
Not necessarily to some extent, but I think I have mostly looked at it from the standpoint of individuals within Ghana creating solutions to problems. So you have a person like, let's say, Patrick Awa, who saw that leadership was very central to Africa's development and that there was a dearth of leaders on the continent, and for that matter, created Access University as a solution to that. So we need a lot of people who imbibe that kind of that way of thinking in order to help create solutions to educational issues.
All right, great. Dr. Agboka, I still want to come back to the issue of relevance. Yes, English, math, science, these are core subjects, these are foundational. Do you find any justification in the argument that why are we even overemphasizing these things at all? And that for years we have done English, math, road memorization and definition, but it's not brought us anything. How do you find that argument?
There might be some merit to that argument, but here's the thing. It is not about the process itself, but the approach, to be honest with you. I mean, you talk about rote memorization. Obviously, that will not get us anywhere. What we need is substance, as far as the educational prospects of our country or our continent, is concerned. So, we can work on the approach, and that will get us to where we have to be.
And how significant is English to that? Or like English language and all these processes?
Globally, the argument that I've heard people make is that, I mean, typically when we hear someone speak the English language, people say that, all right, I don't need English. English is not a mark of intelligence. It is a mark of intelligence. Let me tell you why. You need the English language to express your ideas. So typically, if you find people talking about stuff or other people in the local language, I mean, you see how they're able to say things, right? Insult people and do other things. Move them back to the English language. It becomes a problem. So the issue is that the reason why people talk about the core areas are that the core areas are the foundations to all the other concepts. For example, computer science, you need maths to do that.
Yeah.
Social studies, you need English to do that. So English is not just some abstract thing that you find out there. It is a means to an expression, a means to discuss. So whatever you do revolves around the English language.
Okay.
So that's a key component. Now, the question that we have to address, or the issue we have to address, is the approach to teaching the English language in a way that will be interesting for students to be interested in the subject matter.
Okay.
But I think that in many ways, our approach has been quite problematic.
Okay.
Which is why English, math, and to some extent science scare, to be honest, to use the word, the hell out of students. I went through a system like that.
Okay.
I took issue with that. But of course, I was fortunate enough, I went through. But I don't think that students actually benefit from the way we set up generally our educational system. And I think there are some changes that need to happen to be able to get students to where they are.
So what is that approach which you find problematic?
Okay, great. So there are two things. One, there's the issue of access and the issue of quality. So let me talk about the issue of access, for example. How many of the students or how many resources do we have that will make the kind of education we are talking about meaningful, authentic for students? So if we are able to do that, students will have the materials readily available. In terms of quality, what we can do is that you don't just give the materials to them, but then you have to make the materials authentic to the context in which they find themselves. That will help them to be able to sort of get the materials to resonate with them. That will help the students to be able to connect with the materials. That is crucial.
Okay, so I'll let you hold on for a while there. I understand that we do have the former Minister of Education, Professor Naana Jane Opoku Agyeman. She's not on? Okay, she's not on. So you were talking about some of the factors or the issues. Can you, so you can go on.
Yeah, so I talked about access quality.
Yeah.
So access is how students are able to get access to the materials. Access to classrooms and all that. So that's one. Secondly, we can talk about the issue of quality. How we are able to communicate the materials to students, to make students connect with the materials, to make it authentic enough so that they find it interesting enough to be able to learn the materials. So they go to the classroom and find all these abstract concepts, subject-verb agreement, all these literary terms. To what extent are these necessary and connected to them? Let me tell you a model that has worked in Ghana. If you go to the international schools, the GISs, the international schools and all that, they have a model that works which deals with this issue of what? Authenticity. So students are more relaxed in the classroom. They're able to connect to the materials and all that. So they get the kind of quality we are talking about. Unfortunately, in our context, although we have been able to address the issue of access, because if you look at the research out there, access to primary education is out there. And of course, with the free SHS policy, the issue of access has been addressed. What needs to be done is what the quality component.
The quality. Okay, so you talk about access and then the quality.
Those are the two components.
Okay, so Professor Jane Naana Opoku Agyeman is on the line this time around. Prof is a former Minister of Education in Ghana, but beyond that, we've always known her as a scholar par excellence in her own right, former Vice Chancellor and an educationist who has done a lot of work, not just here in Ghana, but on the global level, and very, very astute person to go to have this kind of discussion on national educational attainment levels and what is happening on the global level as well. Prof, welcome to World Affairs on Class 91.3 FM. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for contacting me, and thanks to your whole management, and good morning to everyone who is listening.
Absolutely. Good morning to you. So, Prof, you've seen it all, if I should say, on various different levels, on the policy level, on the practical level in the classroom, on the scholarly level, and then both nationally and then internationally. When you look at the recent results that have been released by the West African Examinations Council, is that a cause for concern? Some people have said it's not too bad if you get D1 to F, doesn't mean you're a failure and all of that. As an educationist and someone who I believe thinks that education is critical to national development, what is your assessment of the performance? How bad is it?
Thanks for posing this question. Clearly, poor results don't make anyone happy. Okay?
Right.
Poor results don't make government, nor school, nor teachers, nor parents, nor even the student, him or herself, happy. Because that is not necessarily what anybody goes in for. You write an exam and you prepare to pass, or at least I hope that's the case. So when it comes and it's not that, it's not that good, then you have cause to worry. And there was a certain phrase you used that I want to quote you, said education for development. Very, very important. It is at the heart of development. So the performance of your students, let's say at this level, will translate into a certain workforce a number of years to come, you see. So you need to make that projection. Now they've just finished senior high school. So some may be entering the workforce now with what? Others may be entering later, and so on and so forth. And therefore, when the results are not as is expected, it raises worry at many, many, many levels. Okay?
Right.
So, if you want to comment on results, you have to look at many things. So many things have gone into the production of the results. And we keep saying that there are so many stakeholders in education. And these include government itself, it includes the student, it includes the school, it includes the parents, the community. All of these come together in producing the results that we are looking for. But having mentioned all of these, the critical factors will be government, teacher, student. Okay. And government will have to play its role insofar as the provision of trained teachers are concerned, insofar as the provision of adequate and relevant. Now that word is very important. Relevant learning materials are concerned. The school environment has a lot to do with results, and so on and so forth. And when you come to the level of the school, the head of the institution has a very, very important role to play in terms of academic outcomes. Okay, how the head understands his or her role has a lot to do with the kind of results that we may get. And of course, the teacher also, teacher attitude, student attitude, and so on and so forth. So all of these come together. Therefore, if we are not happy with the results, we need to look at all these levels in order to make the proper interventions that we think we should make in order to get better results.
Right. Very well said. Is this a national issue? When you cast your gaze across the expanse of our region and globally, where do you place Ghana? Do you think this is just a Ghana or an African issue, or it's more than that?
See, you need to look at some data. For example, excuse me, you can look at the PISA results. You can look at ranking.
Yeah.
You can tackle this problem from many angles. It is national. It is global as well. But you see, the question I keep asking myself is, why are some countries doing well in these subjects and why are we not doing well?
Great question.
What are they doing right? What can we learn from them? Then you'll see that there's a certain pattern that is coming out of the countries that are performing well, and there's a certain pattern out of the countries that are not performing so well.
Right.
So then you do the study, and then you also go back to, let's say, our own WAEC. Let us go back. It's not just 1 year or 2 years. Minimum, it should be 10 years. Let's say, go back. When was WAEC established? How many students were writing the papers? What percentages were passing? And so on and so on. We did that at the ministry.
Okay.
So that you can have a sense of exactly what has been going on, what have been the intervention strategies, are they working, did we do any evaluation of these intervention strategies, where are the reports, what can we do? Okay, so yes, generally speaking, you may say that science, maths, language tend to pose problems. They tend to pose problems. But in certain countries, they are not problems at all. I understand that the average Japanese student feels that science and maths are easy, and rather it is literature that is hard.
Right.
Interesting, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So then you wonder, so exactly what goes on there? What can I pick from you? Those countries that were not doing well and are now doing well, what happened? You see?
Right.
So yes, we may not have enough of the students passing, but in our case, again, you look at all the remedial schools. It's a huge industry in this country.
True.
And then, so we all wanted to find out what are the main subjects that the students are coming to these institutions to relearn and to rewrite. And it's the same, these same 3 subjects that are on top. So then we ask ourselves, okay, so what can we do to ensure that they are going to pass the subject once and for all, especially when there are requirements for moving up? You know, it means that when the student doesn't get it now, he or she may not move up in the ladder. I mean, up on the ladder.
Right.
Okay, so what can you do? What can you do to ensure that the student is getting a decent pass once and for all?
Wow, very, very interesting, talking about the way research can shape this particular response or intervention. And so I'd like to ask you from a policy perspective, and maybe also you could add the pedagogical perspective as well. How should we be responding to? So what are the approaches? Some people have talked about the Piaget, approach. You use the self-discovery and active learning. Others have also talked about the role, the usefulness of purposive play. Some have complained about the way we have taught English and especially math. From those 2 perspectives, are there any policy interventions that could be done? I remember the argument has been made for local languages. In Kenya, they do the early exit, start with local and they leave at a certain point. So from both a policy and then an educational or pedagogy perspective, what would be some of your recommendations moving forward?
You see, I mentioned countries that were doing well, and hardly a country doing well that is not teaching the children in the language with which they come to school. I haven't seen it. So you know that there's a pattern there. Okay?
All right.
If you see the child comes to school with something, and if you can identify that thing and build on it, learning should be fun. It should be pleasurable. People shouldn't be afraid of learning. You know, this about learning hard, and enjoy learning. You should want to learn because there's something you are discovering as an individual that makes you happy. Okay, so those countries are using the languages that they know. But you know, our case is a bit peculiar because of our history.
Okay.
Okay, we've had a very, very difficult history, and our education too over the years has helped in a lot of ways, but in other ways too has not helped, in the sense of equating speaking non-native language with intelligence, which is not necessarily true. But then it is so strong, you know, very, very strong. Another issue in terms of policy that has not helped us is our language policy. You know, we have had about 9 shifts in language policy, and these oscillate between using local languages at the lower levels or English at all levels. Okay, and really in all of this, what has been amiss is to study the effects of such changes on education outcomes. How do we link these policies to education outcomes? So research is critical. It is, you know, you maybe because wherever I'm coming from, it is a research that allows you to make the interventions that work.
True.
Let me take you back. Between 1925 and I think 51, we had the most consistent language policy. That is, it didn't shift. For 26 years, we have L1, which is a local language, or the L1 is the first language the person speaks. And we have that as a medium of instruction. But after that, we've had 5 years, we've had 4 years, we've had all kinds of things. Too many shifts. Therefore, you don't have one crystallizing enough for you to study it and to track it. Do you get it? So all these changes have had severe effects on our education system. In terms of, you know, to do in terms of pedagogy and so, it is so disappointing that you have to grow up to realize that math is so much fun, it's so easy, it is around us. And then there's a reason why everybody needs math, because we use it all the time. But you see, when you make a subject compulsory, it implies many things, but 2 outstanding ones will be that everybody needs a subject and everybody can learn the subject. It is not everybody that can learn it. Why oblige everyone to do it?
Right.
Therefore, we can teach that subject in ways that make people learn it and enjoy learning it. Okay. We've just gone through the World Cup, haven't we?
Sure.
And you know, kids like football and so on. It's all about math. Look at the shape of the pitch. You see, the number of players. We are talking mathematics by using numbers.
And the statistics from previous.
These are all mathematical words.
Right.
Why? You see, assuming that the syllabus is couched or part of it is couched around a subject that the child finds interesting already, you already have the person's attention. If you can get your students' attention, 50% of your work is done.
Okay.
It is when they can relate to what you are saying that, you know, they have the sense that, oh, this is difficult and they can't do it. And once it gets into your brain that you can't do it, it's going to be hard for you to get good results. So I feel that the methodology is very, very important. Bring the math home. Science is around us. We say it's universal. It means it's around us all the time. So many examples can be used that the student can relate to. But if what is going on in let's say the mother's business, the mother processes food, and there's none of that in the textbook, do you get it? But by processing food, what are you doing? It's chemistry, it's biochemistry, it's many things. It's not there. So how can the child relate to what is going on? And I think that all of these have implications for learning outcomes. But also, let me make the point that there are schools that will be doing well regardless. We know that, don't we?
Absolutely.
So you need to find out what is happening in that school that makes the results so good, and how can we duplicate that thing in other schools? It's harder, but it can be done.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, it's also Ghanaian children. It's also, you know, they are not, excuse me to say, any more or less bright and so on and so forth. So how can you help this person in this school also do well, you must have a trained teacher. You must have a teacher who spends enough time on task. You must have the teacher must also have the right environment to operate. The teacher must have the equipment to work with. The child must decide to want to learn. Do you get it?
Yes.
So all of these will have to come together. And it's not just science and math and English, although these are critical subjects, but every subject matters.
Sure.
So you can also ask yourself the question, how are these subjects evaluated? You know, the whole area of measurement and evaluation is a very, very complex area, and yet you can always break everything down. How come the student is passing the other subjects? What makes it easy for the student to pass that other subject? And what makes it so hard for the student to pass this subject? Do you get me?
Yes.
So what methodology is being applied there? Can we translate? Can we learn from each other? You know, what is going on?
Wow. Right. No, thank you so much. And that even reminds me of some of the policies that you put in place, operationalizing and strengthening some of these key agencies for measurement and inspection, the NTC and the NCCA. And then you also mentioned the language policy from KG to P3 as well. Well, hopefully this discourse of this conversation will continue. It's very unfortunate. The conversation was getting interesting, but we had little time.
I understand that.
Yes.
No problem.
Yes, Prof.
So you have a good day and thanks for calling.
Thank you, Prof. We look forward to having you on another day as well.
Sure, thanks.
All right, so back to World Affairs on Class 91.3 FM. I'm here in the studio with Dr. Godwin Agboka and Mac Sarbah, and Professor. We just spoke to Professor Naana Jane Opoku Agyeman. Before I come to you, Mac, Doc, you want to finish up with what you were saying and then maybe respond to a couple of issues?
Yeah, so let me make 3 points quickly. First of all, as I indicated, poor education is a personal tragedy that imprisons people in poverty. That's crucial.
Okay.
Now, it is important for us to be able to connect education to economic growth or lack of growth. Research actually suggests that if all 15-year-olds were able to get access to quality education, Ghana's economic growth would increase to about 4%.
Wow.
I think it's for South Africa about close to 3%.
Okay.
So that tells us how important that is. Now, the minister highlighted the issue that I talked about, authenticity, making education relevant and interesting. So from the point of language, if you're teaching language, use something that is already familiar to the student. Use that as a route, as a conduit to be able to help them. We have a number of students who are doing well in religious and moral education, physical education. Why is that the case? Because the material there is interesting.
Well, what about English language? What have been some of the biggest problems or challenges you've had, teaching English language? And how can somebody just come, I just want to learn how to write very well and all of that. How do you let that click? How do you make that happen?
Now, English is interesting. First of all, it's a foreign language, definitely. So obviously, people need effort to be able to do that. But then when you teach English too, you have to make it interesting. What I do is that when you come to the classroom as an L1 student,
level 1? Oh,
no, L1 is people for whom English is not a first.
Okay.
So when you come to the classroom, what do you have in the local language that will help me to make you connect with the concept that I'm teaching in the English language? That helps students to be. So I have students, what some of the students I teach do is that before they write something in English, they go back to their local language, they have a story in their local language, and they bring all of that into the English language and they express that on paper. So you find materials. Now, the minister talked about math, for example, the World Cup. People like sports.
Sure.
So you use the same concept of the World Cup to talk about mathematical concepts. We do the same thing as far as the English language is concerned. Science is also the same. Finally, what we need to do is this. we have to demystify education and the writing of examinations. When you go to the classroom, a student sitting in class should not be scared of the classroom, of the teacher who walks into the classroom.
So should we take out the cane?
No, I mean the cane is, for me, it's a colonial thing. It's the worst thing to happen to education. I don't see why a student goes to class and then has to be caned, has to be flogged. It doesn't make sense. For me, I don't think so. I don't think we should even encourage that. Now, I think it's been outlawed in the country, but I don't know to what extent that is happening. But then, the demystification process I'm talking about it. If a student walks into the classroom, they should relax to be able to absorb the material in the classroom. Now, look at the setting in which we write examinations. During final examination, students sit over there, and it's as if it's a firing squad. So you get into the examination hall already scared, and 50% of the failure happens right there and then. That is not how things are supposed to be done.
Let's live in the face of the invigilator.
Exactly, that is what is happening. So, yes, we can talk about access, policy, and all that, but some of these socio-cultural issues also affect the way the success or failure of our students.
Very well said, Dr. Agboka. Matt, just a lot of this one I want to back toward you, but there is the academic discussion to be had, but also like the other discussions about the things that you do, social entrepreneurship and innovation, the game changer, and how we can build our own Silicon Valley and, be Afrocentric, and more nationalistic in our approach to development. You've mentioned some examples. I was going to ask you, do you have examples of social entrepreneurs? You've talked about Patrick Ewa. You've also talked about how you got interested in social entrepreneurship, the classes that you made in Mexico and design and all of that. So with a little time that we have, do you find a lot of Ghanaians going into social entrepreneurship? And if yes, why, and no, why?
Yeah, I think to echo some of the points that the minister made. First of all, I wanted to touch on sort of the ecosystem, creating some of these sort of fears to mathematics and English and things of the sort. Where I'm from in Mapa, you have the bulk of young people in school completely by themselves. They have their parents living in places that are very far away from them. So with the advent of modern technology, in our time, we were looking for things of the sort to be able to use that to acquire knowledge. But more recently, these kids are pretty much on social media, and instead of using it more effectively and accumulating knowledge that will help them be more effective in some of these subjects, that's not the case. But to answer your question in regards to social entrepreneurship, I think the pedagogy in our universities pretty much precludes people from being excessively reliant on creating solutions for themselves. So people are pretty much indoctrinated into the dogma of graduating and taking jobs instead of creating jobs for themselves. You get it? And then culturally, I think we're also slightly more risk averse in a sense that because we're a culture that prides ourselves on face saving. We don't want to be guilty because we tried and failed and things of the sort. And also, not only that, but the ecosystem. We don't have an effective ecosystem. There's a burgeoning ecosystem that needs support. There are no access to funds. You don't have investors in Ghana that are willing to invest in young people that are creating solutions to problems. Because Ghanaians don't like to be known, to be rich. You understand? So there's a cultural thing around being wealthy that people aren't willing to go public with it. So you have young people with great ideas that aren't being funded or do not have the ideas. And so when I talk about the pedagogy, people don't, in as much as they would have the willingness and the ideas, they don't have the training to be able to nurture those ideas and get them from that to start up and also get them to end up. So these are some of the constraints within the environment that are, getting in the way of having people create solutions to social issues that we have. But there are solutions to that, and we can certainly talk about that.
Yeah, can you mention a couple of them before we leave? We just have about 2 or 3 minutes.
Right, the UN Sustainable Development Goal 4, which focuses on education. There's something called the Sustainable Development Fund.
Okay.
So in which any young person who has a solution that would be over the long pool be able to create solutions to a social problem within the educational sector will be able to have access to funds. And then you have funds like the Agyeman Fund, you have a crowdfunding, Kickstarter, and things of the sort. So I think there are a number of resources out there that people aren't aware of, and it's important that we create that awareness, create the ecosystem, create innovation labs and centers that will help young people with ideas to be able to go through these kinds of incubators and accelerators that will help them bring those to life.
All right, Dr. Agboka, what do you think? Is English a pidgin language in social media? How much of a factor are they to these failures that we are seeing?
I usually want to address this issue by looking at the reading culture that we have in the country. I mean generally. Because I think that foundationally we need we need to encourage reading at a very basic level. Reading quality material that sort of works on issues of quality writing and all that. And that's where your pidgin and social media comes in. Now the challenge is that because of the overuse of these things, when students find themselves in those, they don't read enough, they are not well read, they are not broad enough. So that's where they go to their comfort zone, which is pidgin, social media language, which is what I call by the way, BTW, whatever thing. So you find actually, and this is not just a Ghanaian problem, it's actually a global problem as well that we see. All right.
Okay, so I guess we'll continue with this on another day, but time is up for today. We've been talking about education in Africa and social entrepreneurship, and my guest today on World Affairs, once again, Mac Sarbah, graduate student, Harvard University, founder of EdACME. How do you say that? EdACME, www.edacme.com. Coming here from Harvard University, but then the story is from Adidome. Thanks, Matt, for coming in. Dr. Godwin Agboka, Technical and Professor Communication, University of Houston, Texas. And on the line, we had Professor Naana Jane Opoku Agyeman, the former Minister of Education. My name is Eche Sikanku. Thanks to the production crew who helped and contributed to the success of this program. Up next is Owning Your Own House. Goodbye, God bless, and good weekend.
This is Class 91.3.
Everybody needs a little touch of class in their everyday activities, whether you're in the bank, in the office, in the cafeteria, in the hospital, in the garage, on campus, just anywhere.